Welcome to She Can and She Will. My name is Marianne Brown, also known as the Country Mompreneur. I'm joined by my co-host, Disa McAllister. We are moms, work-from-home experts, and queens at helping women take control of their lives. On this show, you will learn from us as well as other women who kick butt in their lives and want to help you do the same. So sit back and get ready for some fun. Today we're being joined by Danielle Bettmann, a certified parenting coach, and we definitely need to speak to you today. Before we get too involved with everything that you're specializing in, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
We're happy to have you.
Yeah. My quick story is I'm, an education major. I got my teaching certification from birth through third grade. And I was teaching in Head Start and early Head Start programs as a lead teacher and moved into home visiting. I worked for Save the Children and I was with families for an hour every week in their home, really equipping the parent with more resources, developmental screenings, books, all that good stuff, and loved it. And then I became a parent myself. And I wanted to go back and apologize to everyone I ever spoke to because the textbooks and the classroom is one thing. And as we know, parenting is a whole nother breed where you just don't know what you don't know until you're in it. And I decided, by accident, to have my two daughters 15 months apart, which I don't professionally recommend. So it was a blur. And as I survived, I realized that I did not know siblings could be this different. They were two completely different breeds of children. And my first was pretty compliant, easy go with the flow. My second was the opposite. You cannot change her mind. Hurry up means nothing. All the big emotions. And so I had to really figure out what worked for her and that I knew from, what worked with my background in child development and all the things. Started working as a leader of a mom's group and eventually 4 years ago now started my business. And that was because I was really just helping my friends figure out what to do with their really tough kid and having lots of success at my house, getting my husband on board as well. So with the pandemic, that turned all virtual and I started my podcast. It's called Failing Motherhood 3 years ago now. And I love what I do now, which is work with families that have 1 to 7 year old strong-willed kids. And they are just struggling because they can't be patient because of course, right? And they struggle to get their child's behavior under control because strong-willed kids are a different breed and they just don't respond to traditional discipline. And so you feel like you're left with no tools. And then you feel like you are a hostage negotiator and, you don't even know what to say because it's not working. And so we work on communication, composure, and core needs for these kids over a 3-month period and really transform their relationship with this tough kid that we know that we love them, but it's hard to like them a lot of the times. And so we really changed that dynamic with a lot less meltdowns and feeling a lot more confident. And so I do that all virtually now. And yeah, I think that's me. I have 2 daughters now that are 8 and 9 already. And we live in the heart of the Midwest in Omaha, Nebraska. And I'm married to my high school sweetheart.
Aw. Well, I love the name of your podcast. I think that's exactly what we feel like failing motherhood is.
Right?
Yeah. Anytime something goes wrong, you didn't eat your vegetables, I'm failing motherhood. But yeah.
Yeah. 20 reasons a day at least. Yep.
Oh, my goodness. That is perfect. So can you go into detail or a little bit of depth about what a strong-willed child is?
Yes.
What qualifies?
Yes. So it's a little bit of if you know, you know. But it's really good to even know what it is because, sometimes we're so close to it. So the main difference between strong-willed kids and, typical development compliant kids is that they're driven by this sense of these 2 empty cups of control and attention. And while the circumstances look fair to them, their perception is very skewed and they are driven by this justified, strong sense of self that these needs aren't met and I will do what it takes to get these needs met. I will not go without it. Whereas other kids may say, these needs aren't getting met, so there must be something wrong with me, which is a different problem entirely. With these kids, They would rather have negative attention than no attention. So they are going to get it, and they are going to get control out of power struggles if they don't feel like life is enough within their control. And that really drives the ship. They are not motivated by external factors like bribes and threats and rewards and punishments. It just really doesn't change their mind because they know what they want, and they know what they want so strongly that when it comes crashing down with reality, they have a very hard time dealing with the despair and the big feelings that they have about, not going their way. And so they lose their mind a lot in really big ways. And it's very hard for them to cope with it because those feelings feel so big, understandably. And then they feel misunderstood when everyone else in their life doesn't react as they should in their mind. And there's a big disconnect. And so they really start to take life in their own reins, and it is not mutually beneficial for us as their parent, and makes things really difficult, like getting shoes on and, getting in their car seat and, minor details like that.
Do you feel like you have to get a buy-in from I feel a little bit like my son, he's 13 now, so he's older, and his father and I are not together. His father is very strong-willed and do you think a lot of it is environment? And do you have a hard time getting parents sometimes to buy in your methods because maybe they're stuck in certain ways?
Oh, definitely. There's always nature and nurture working together. And yes, there are really a lot of things that circumstantially exacerbate this type of personality. If there's a lot of big changes, moves, new sibling, something going on with a parent, it's definitely going to affect how this shows up as that child. And there's a genetic piece because usually one of the parents ends up being pretty strong-willed themselves, and then, that manifests in their child, whether they like it or not. And so it's all about really understanding and managing that in a healthy way where you're trying to work with it rather than against it. And yeah, there's a whole world of preconceived notions that we come to terms with as a parent that are unhelpful, that make it very hard to kind of come to terms with who our kid is when they're trying to tell us who they are. And that really does get in the way. And so there's a lot of families that will never, work with me or wrap their minds around that, because they just see it completely differently. And, our conditioning from the way that we were parented shows up a lot. The experiences that we've had as a kid, really just begins to either challenge that because what we're doing isn't working. And, we start to find other options, or we just kind of double down and cross our fingers and hope for the best. And yeah, we're all a little bit winging it one way or the other.
Do you feel like also it's probably a generational thing, just because different generations, it even seems like parent and want to get involved with their kids in a different way? Like, I'm way more involved with my child than my parents ever were with me.
Yep, for sure. For sure. And I think a lot of that is, just the circumstances of working from home or dad's being more available to be home, or, really everybody's trying to say, how can I do better than my parents, or what did I miss out on that I can, do better with my kids? And then we kind of swing a pendulum to like the other side of being too permissive instead of strict. And, we're all kind of taking a whack at it from what we're thinking coming into it. And that's why it's called parenting and not childing. It's so much more about us.
Yes. Now I know you're a parenting coach, so you don't get involved with medical things like that, but do you ever find that people will choose to, my kid has ADHD and medicate them rather than actually, it's not that. It's just a matter of getting more involved and redirecting them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of just misunderstanding because behavior is the tip of the iceberg. And it's really hard to see what's going on underneath the surface that's leading to that behavior. So we end up playing whack-a-mole in a lot of different ways, with like really unhelpful approaches just because we're guessing. And so, of course, like things can be skewed to look like any one shape or form. And that's not to say that there is not medically induced reasons to medicate ADHD. But I think, the way that I approach things is kind of by a process of elimination where it's like, it's not going to hurt to be more patient so that you're offering more regulation to your child, and speak to them in ways that are much more compelling for cooperation for all humans, and be able to make sure that they have a lot of opportunities in their life to feel in control and like they have your attention. And by proxy, there's going to be a lot of behavior that just kind of falls away because it's no longer needed. And then we can see what's left the exception to the rule, or what's really unique about your circumstance and your child, and have a lot of clarity about like taking that to your pediatrician to say, here's what's still going on for us, even though we have all these things set up in their life for them to be successful. But usually it's the inverse, right? We just go right to the pediatrician, say something's wrong with them, and, put all the responsibility on them to kind of like fix it or do better without really looking internally at how we're contributing to that at all. So
what are some of the things to note that okay, my kid's a strong-willed child? Because some parents are just going to be like, oh, well, he's just a brat. But like, how can you tell that my kid's actually a strong-willed child?
Yeah. When you get a lot of resistance and pushback and defiance with really simple things, and, it's always been the way that things have been. They always have been obstinate. They've always, had that type of personality where it feels like you're walking on eggshells. And, anything could set them off, and it would be a big meltdown because you didn't even know that that's what they were expecting was going to happen, because they have all these unspoken expectations about the day. And you just are reeling, and then that affects usually their sibling because they can sense the tension and don't want you to yell, and, also don't feel like things are fair because that other sibling's getting a lot of attention. And it just begins to kind of permeate the whole family, where you feel like you are dealing with more than just a manipulation behavior or something. It's so much deeper, and it doesn't feel like anything you do kind of gets at it, where, it's not, kids, especially under the age of 7, don't have the cognitive capacity to be manipulative, because that takes on a much higher level emotional intelligence to actually put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand how your actions are going to affect the way that they feel, and then be able to like have the prefrontal cortex to executive function plan ahead to like put all of that strategy into place. It's so much more impulsive and reactionary that it's just their lack of impulse control. It's their lack of maturity. It's their lack of really just understanding, right? Like how that even affects other people, because they're still very egocentric. So when you take that explanation out of the equation, it's much more logical to be like, oh, this is just how they think. It's not about me.
Yeah. So as soon as you said there's no reward or punishment that would affect them, I immediately thought of someone, right?
Yep.
And it's been a mystery. Youngest of 3, the youngest of the generation period. So it's not like this was just, just like hey, we were expecting this. Like it was a very big surprise, and this perplexed a lot of people. But it gets dangerous in some situations. Like we took a trip to the Grand Canyon, and this person is also a little oppositional. So if you're like, hey, don't drink that, it's got some yucky stuff in it, they'll go over there right away, right? Like there's some oppositional stuff in there. But this person said, what would you do if I just jumped over the cliff right now? And I was like, I would cry because you'd be gone. Because I didn't want to feed into it. But then I spent the rest of the trip just like walking on the other side of them to make sure like, you don't think that I'm scared about that, but like, yeah, I mean, that really was I was horrified. I was really scared that was actually going to happen, and there wouldn't have been anything that I could, no ice cream, no nothing that I could do.
Right. And how helpless is that feeling? Yeah.
Horrible. If it's a life and death situation, you need their kid to like listen to you. So how do you approach the parenting style so that there is that level of trust of like, dude, if I tell you not to sit in the middle of the road, don't sit in the middle of the road,
Yes. Yes. And I'm certified in positive discipline. So that's where, like, if you want to learn more about that, there's a whole book series and things. But, a big piece of that is that your relationship is founded on the dynamics of being like a really good leader, right? Like a boss that you would want to work for, that you want to do well for them. You feel like they care what you have to say. You're not micromanaged. You're not undermined. Whatever compels us to work hard as a 35-year-old is going to be what compels, the typical kid to be in an environment where it feels like, yeah, like I, want to do well and I care what this person thinks kind of thing. But then for strong-willed kids, you have to take that a little bit further, because that environment alone, they typically do well at school because there's a lot of structure and there's a lot of like feedback of, attention and belonging in that space, and they really understand, the expectations, and there's just a lot of that met, but they really do hold it together and then unleash it at home. And it's more concentrated where the parent-child relationship is the most tumultuous because they, the biggest compliment feels so safe with you. But that makes it very hard to deal with, especially when they take on these kind of like inflammatory behaviors, like you said with that example, where, they're the ones to say, this is the worst day of my life at, 5 about not getting a cupcake for breakfast. And you're like, how are we already here? How did this escalate so quickly? And it's very confusing because of course your mind as an adult does not rationally relate. You're not like, oh, I would react the same way, or I would feel the same way as you. Like, I get it. You're just like, no, we are not on the same playing field at all. I do not connect with this. I do not get it at all. And so it makes it very hard to make them feel like you are on their team and you have their back and you get it. And that's the biggest like thing that strong-willed kids want, is for their leader to get it. Because if they don't, they pretty much write it off. Like their ears are locked and they want nothing to do with what you have to say, unless you really do meet that need of like, I get it. And that's very hard when we don't even know what they're talking about sometimes, or what led up to this meltdown in the first place. And that's where it feels very elusive, or like validating their emotions is a bit of a dance because you can get it wrong a lot. And that's just, they're mind-boggling in a lot of ways. But the biggest piece of it really comes down to knowing how to collaboratively problem solve rather than feel like you're the one leading with the agenda and kind of being the judge and jury and, putting all of the power in your side of the relationship. Is trying to balance that out with a lot of mutual respect and conversations outside of emotional moments that make a lot bigger difference, because in the emotional moments, you have very little influence. They're not teachable and you're not teaching very well either. So being able to maximize the moments outside of those blow ups make a big difference, and problem solving things together. And then being able to just have ways to communicate in the moment to diffuse things that hit that chord as much as possible of, I'm saying what you're saying. I'm saying things you agree with. I hear you. I totally get what you're saying. Even when you don't genuinely relate, it's like, well, knowing what I know about you, this reaction makes sense.
So say I reached out to you and I needed your help with my son, but my husband and I are not together. He parents us totally differently. So I get on board with you. I'm working with my son. He goes to his dad's for a weekend. He comes back acting up again because he spent all weekend with that. Yeah. How do you help people when they're in a situation like that?
That's super challenging because you're trying to maximize all the things that you have control over as a parent. And that takes a huge piece out of your control. And of course, that's going to affect things. I mean, that affects things when, they go to school and come home, and when they go to grandparents and come home, there's like a hangover. There's like a detox period from getting back into the routine. And that's a huge challenge. And there is an aspect of just kind of relinquishing that and accepting that and doing what you can, because of course that's what you're doing currently. And trying to communicate to any other caregivers, whether that's a nanny or a ex or a grandparent that, watches them occasionally. Hey, this is what's really been working lately for us. This is what I'm starting to learn and realize about him. Do with this information what you will, but, I just feel compelled to share it because it's making a big difference. You can do that, and that, can help you just feel like you've done everything you can to set them up for success, but then just really label it with the child. Like, hey, I get that this is hard, and, rules are different at each other's houses. And I know how you come back feeling like things have been out of your control and they've been a little bit crazy. So when you come back, what are some ways that we can get back on track together? Like what feels good to reset once you're back at my house, and collaboratively problem solve that together and come to some conclusions that maybe you hadn't even thought of, but they are able to verbalize to you, and then, automatically feel more connected to you. And that's going to leverage, your relationship in a great way.
That's awesome. All right. Slight side note. What is your favorite way to stay organized?
I would die without my Google Calendar, probably. Like we have everything for our family, work, everything between my husband and I shared. And if I don't put it in my calendar from that school email, the second I read it, we will not be there.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So that's my tried and true. Of course, I have a printed paper workbook or, planner that I have over here. I did start using a new way to organize some of my to-do list with Post-it notes, where you basically just like brain dump. I have all the tasks that like need to get done eventually on to-do lists or on these Post-it notes, put the Post-it notes in a binder, and then you just pull 3 each time to the top page. And those are like the main things you need to prioritize. And that has helped to just feel like I have a place for some of the things where it's like, I really want to do this like a month from now when I have time, and didn't really know what to do with that. And now I have my little binder with my Post-its over here. So I feel like at least eventually.
Full of Post-its, it would be.
I know. It will easily get out of control. And I tried to like color code the Post-its, with like home and work. So it might balance it out, but yeah, it's working.
Awesome. So how can people work with you? When people work with you, is it a one-on-one? Is it a group session? And how can people get a hold of you to do all this stuff?
Yeah. So I've been working with families one-on-one for about 3 years now. And a year and a half ago, I started up a group program, and I just transitioned to really doing the group format only at this point with new families, because it has been so powerful to work on and commit to and invest in this change with other people that really do get it, because they have kids just like yours, and they can commiserate and they can share ideas that I don't even have, and do it in a really safe container to be vulnerable. And that is like an ongoing ecosystem where some families are, about to graduate. Some families have just joined. So it's about 3 months long. And you are able to kind of turn around and teach people that are coming in behind you. It's really beautiful. And it's called Wholeheartedly Calm. And it's working on, again, that your composure, your communication, and the core needs of your child to eliminate those behaviors, reduce the meltdowns, and feel a lot more confident. And that's for families with strong-willed kids age 1 to 7 primarily, all over Zoom. So wherever you're at, you can jump in. The calls are live each week. You have a portal of training to work through on your own time, which is really short audio bits that keep you like dialed into lots of examples and analogies to make it make sense. And then a Facebook group to stay connected. So for more information about that, my website is called parentingwholeheartedly.com. And on that homepage, you can find a free training that's an hour long. It's called Unapologetic and Authentic, where you learn some of the core principles of parenting your strong-willed child without threats and bribes and without crushing their spirit. So that's the best place to start if you want to understand more about my methodology and, what tips you need to start shifting right away. And then, the group is there as well. Or I'm on Instagram, at parent_wholeheartedly.
Awesome. And we'll also put all this info in the show notes for everybody.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Danielle.
Of course. This is fun. I'll talk about it all day.
You were doing some amazing work. Yeah, this is a much needed helper. Thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us about this.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. For more information, join us at thepmagency.com.